this year I really had to analyze and rebuild my relationship with work. Over the last 3 years, I have been pushing myself and my body well past the point of just working hard to honestly pure exhaustion, mentally, physically, and even spiritually. And so this year, I really challenged myself to take a new approach to work. And so I slowed all the way down and started to prioritize self-care. And I started to watch videos about it, follow some people on Instagram who promote self-care and taking care of yourself. However, over the last 11 months that I have been doing this new routine of work, I have also noticed some dangers in the self-care rhetoric, and I wanted to talk about it. So, if you are no longer buying into toxic hustle culture, is there actually a danger of the opposite extreme? Is there a toxic level of self-care? Hey boo, so this is actually the first of a 2-part conversation we're going to be having on my channel over the next 1 week. And so after you've watched this video, let me know what you think in the comment section down below so that I can include your opinion in my next video. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I hope that you are all doing well. In today's video, we are going to be talking about self-care versus toxic hustle culture, the two extremes of that spectrum, and why I think whilst we should reject toxic hustle culture, that the self-care movement may go a little bit too far. My name is Courtney Daniela Boateng. Welcome to my channel if you are new. Welcome back if you are not. If you have not already, please do hit subscribe and join this community. We would really love to have you around. So, what is toxic hustle culture? For me, hustle culture is really that content that you see, or those people who talk about the fact that you need to work hard, you need to grind. These are your years for getting in the work, put in the hours. And I am a big believer in hard work, do not get me wrong. But I think hustle culture can turn toxic when it becomes about pushing yourself, pushing your body, your mind, and your life well past its limits, really focusing in so much on work that you can't have a work-life balance. And also when you attach your sense of self-worth and your sense of purpose to the amount you work, i.e. the harder I'm working, the more valuable I am of a person, or if I'm not working, I'm basically just a waste of space. And I think these rhetorics can start to get dangerous. But on the flip side, you have self-care. Now, self-care can take many different forms. A lot of content you may see may be around physical self-care, taking care of your body, stuff like that. And I think self-care can sometimes become a lot about aesthetics, the candles, the bubble baths, blah, blah, blah. But in general, self-care is mainly about taking care of yourself. How are you taking care of your body and your mind? And are you actually being intentional about taking care of your body and your mind and your soul? What are you doing in order to show yourself that you care towards yourself? Because I think in response to living in a capitalist society, oftentimes, like I aforementioned in toxic hustle culture, you can start to think that you are what you do, and you push yourself so hard to work that you never take time to really check in on yourself, or really just put in daily practices that show yourself you're more than just your work and you need to take care of your body. And I think that that's a really important thing to think about every single day. Self-care. Why? Because I think we do live in a society where it's go, go, go. However, I think there is a toxic level self-care can get to, which kind of blindsides you to the realities of life. And I personally, based on my background, have had harsh experiences with the realities of life. Now, don't get me wrong, reality is different for every single person. Depending on the way you grew up, your background, your family, the amount of resources you had access to, reality is shaped and framed quite differently in your mindset. For me personally, I grew up in a single parent working class home where my mum worked bloody hard all the time. Sis was a grafter, and I grew up watching that. Both my parents work really, really hard. They set goals, they are very ambitious, but also they work towards them, oftentimes because of necessity, taking care of their families and also taking care of their extended family to make sure that everyone can pretty much live above the poverty line. And I've seen that firsthand growing up with my parents taking care of family back home. Being a part of the diaspora or being a first generation immigrant, I think a lot of us can relate to seeing your parents work really really hard because they were the ones that got out. My mum was the first in her family to move to a foreign country, and she was able to pay for her younger siblings to go to university, or pay for that cousin's child to go to school, or send money to that person so that they can actually get medical care and attention. That is a lot of pressure put on one person to work really hard to make enough income to support multiple people. However, in a lot of cultures, that is not foreign. In a lot of cultures, that sense of duty or responsibility that you have towards your family, whether extended or your primary family, is a huge driving force for why you work. It's a huge driving force for why you do and make the choices that you do around your finances, your money, and your time. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of us who are maybe a part of the diaspora or first generation immigrants to Western countries can often think that that level of sacrifice or that level of working hard to support so many people is toxic. We have to understand that there are culture differences. There are cultural differences towards people's approach to family and that sense of unity and oneness and support. What does that look like? In some cultures, you don't really care about your extended family. They are their own people. Whereas in other cultures, your extended family matter just as much as your own children. And I think losing those elements can sometimes be a result of westernization of certain cultures. And so I don't think it's necessarily bad. However, growing up and seeing that, it definitely shaped the way I viewed work. I often saw my parents work themselves to the bone and often be thinking about one day I'll retire, one day I'll live and I'll reap the fruits of what it is that I'm doing now. But right now it's all about working, grinding, sowing, giving, and forgetting sometimes that they can also enjoy the fruits of their own labor and not feel guilty about it and not feel bad about it. So I grew up seeing that from my parents, but also there was an element of like scarcity there, right? Like when you grow up, for example, I grew up on a council estate, not everyone around you, well, most people around you don't have money, but you still make the best out of life. But oftentimes I was reminded of scarcity, especially as I got to like university and I saw people from completely different backgrounds who had completely different lifestyles and resources available to them. I started to realize, oh, okay, we really had to make some lemonade out of lemons, and those lemons were tipsy because we didn't have this much. And it really did frame my idea of what I want to have in the future. Now that I had been exposed to, I guess, a world of abundance, or a world where the possibilities were endless and you didn't have to just take the bare minimum, you could actually dream and you could take the time, and you had the privilege to dream. You had the privilege of not having to worry about basic needs like, you know, your bill and how the next bill is going to be paid, or how the rent is going to be paid, or, you know, that person who is sick who has to be provided for because they're literally on their deathbed. You didn't have to think about stuff like that. You were thinking about building massive tech companies and the possibilities of the future and being able to change and shape the world, and, you know, big meta stuff about politics. Like, that's what I was experiencing at university. And it started to make me realize not everyone lives running. Not everyone lives on, not necessarily on the rat race or on the hamster wheel, but some people stop to really look at the world and have a meaningful, purposeful life. However, that's not because they are up there and they think they're better than everyone. Actually, it's because their lives have allowed them to live that life of to a degree, the privilege to be able to do that. And I wanted that for myself, and I really want that for my children as well. And I think then coming out of university and then going into working, it framed the way I viewed work. It framed the way I pushed myself. That mix of seeing my parents, wanting to retire them, wanting to also provide my children with so many opportunities, there was always that need to work really hard, and I found myself falling into toxic hustle culture. And the way I would say I fell into it was, it no longer became about meeting results necessarily. It became about, if I'm not working, I'm lazy. If I'm not working, I'm being unproductive. And it led to a huge amount of overwhelm, but I almost started to feel guilty that I was feeling overwhelmed. And I started to tell myself things like, well, other people aren't overwhelmed. They're doing more than you. People your age are doing X, Y, Z, and you fall into comparison, and I was also telling myself things like, you know, you have something to prove. And I oftentimes have to think about like imposter syndrome and the way that it has impacted me, because I often find myself in spaces that I don't feel like I deserve to be in. And so I was constantly telling myself things like, you need to prove that you belong here. You need to prove that you deserve the things you have. You need to constantly prove yourself. And that comes from working tremendously hard. And I think that's when the hustle and the grind became toxic, because I've always been a hustler. I've always been a grinder. You know, I used to sell stuff in the playground. That was me. I like did entrepreneurship stuff from early. I started working at 16 and working like full days and hours whilst I was still at sixth form. Like I've always hustled, but that hustle was always pushed by there's not enough. There's not enough money. There's not enough resources. You need to get more. You need to get more. You need to provide more for yourself and for other people. But also I was fighting this lie that I've had in my head since I was a kid, that I'm lazy. Like I'm a lazy person. And it's mad, because sometimes I talk about it like in therapy or to people, and they're like, you think you're lazy and yet you do all this stuff, but I'm still being fed that lie of I'm lazy. And so toxic hustle culture really attacks that, right? It's like, stop being lazy, get off your backside, like go at life, be that go-getter. And I was, but I just couldn't see it. And I was driving myself really into the ground, to the point where I was super overwhelmed. And I would say I was anxious and panicky. I couldn't sleep properly. I didn't eat properly because I was constantly working. I was not and even the hours I did allocate myself to sleep, I was literally working in my brain. So literally my whole world was consumed by work. I would often blow off things that I had to do with my friends or with my family, because it wasn't work related. I thought of it as a waste of time, because it was a luxury that I couldn't afford because I was still proving myself. And so that's when I think hustle culture becomes toxic. However, I do still believe in the need for hard work. This year, I've really had to challenge myself on redefining what is hard work. What do I consider to be a hard day's work? Does it actually have to be hard, as in painful, exhausting? Am I punishing myself with work, or am I putting too many obstacles in front of me, kind of taking victory in jumping over the hurdles rather than actually making it to the finishing line? Am I overcomplicating this because I wear my work ethic as a badge of honor? Struggle, it's not my name. It's not written on my forehead. I should actually, and what I've decided for myself, and discovered for myself, I am a lady of leisure. I actually love comfort. I love nice things. And I actually don't like to be, I don't like to be uncomfortable, but because I think discomfort as a personal development tool is amazing, right? Stepping out of your comfort zone, blah, blah, blah. But there's comfort, and then there's genuine torture and pain. I don't like pain. I don't like most humans, I don't like pain. I don't also like the feeling of failure. And I think oftentimes hustle culture frames you as a failure if you don't work really hard and push yourself. And like I said, kind of show this badge of overworking, you're a failure. And I'm not a failure, and you're not a failure just because you're not working these hours. So I really had to redefine what is hard work and what is success. Because as much as we say enjoy the process and enjoy the journey, the result really does matter. And as somebody who likes to be efficient and doesn't like to do too much, actually I had to start leaning on the fact that I want to get things done as quickly as possible, right? As much as this grueling process is pulling out a great personal development story, I actually don't want the hurdles and the trials that are unnecessary. I don't want to put obstacles in my own way. So if I can find a way to get to my goal fast, obviously still ethical, still moral, we'll talk about that in just context, still ethically, still morally integral to myself, if I can still get there quicker, I would rather do that than kind of making the process hard just so I can say I did it the hard way. Because I think growing up, you often think you have to struggle for things. You have to struggle for things. If you want something good, it's going to be a struggle. To a degree, that is true as a principle of life. Yeah, that's true. Good things do not come easy. However, hard is relative, right? And I was pushing myself to the extremes of hard that my body could not take. What is hard for me might not be hard for any other person, right? And so they might see it as that's easy, but for me, personally, I was doing the most and it was killing me. And I don't want that. I don't want to literally hustle till I die because I caused my own death. Like I'm not trying to go through that. And exhaustion is real, right? Anxiety is real. Panicking is real. Worrying is real. Living in a place where you can't enjoy your family, your life. And there's more to life than work. And that's when I kind of got to that point in January where I was like, I need to reframe my approach to life and to work. It led me to really taking better care of myself because I was in a horrible place physically. My body was aching. I was 23, firstly. My body was aching me like I was 85. That's not it, okay? I didn't see my family. I wasn't being a part of things that my family and my friends were doing. I was losing so many relationships. And I was a bad friend. I was a bad sister. I was a bad daughter to a degree. And I wasn't showing up. I also wasn't doing the things that I was passionate about anymore. And so the hustle was no longer fun. And that's when I can honestly say toxic hustle culture can be very addictive, right? Like I said, you get addicted to results, or even being exhausted and being busy. And you use that to define who you are as a person, rather than actually getting over the hurdles of the hard work and just being content in the results, right? And also realizing that you are not just your work. You are not I know we have these ideas of like purpose and all of these things, and we have to live that out, but your purpose isn't just to work. It isn't just to be an entrepreneur. It's also to be relational to people. It's also to play a part in your community. It's also to live. And you may be outworking yourself out of all the other things you should be doing purposefully. And that's what I was doing, and my life was no longer enjoyable. And that's when work got to a point where I don't enjoy this. I don't enjoy what I do. I don't enjoy my day-to-day life. Work is becoming a massive burden. And I think we have to reframe the way we think about work. It shouldn't, I would even argue, work shouldn't be something you detest. Right? Work should be something that actually ignites you and makes you passionate, because it's something you spend so much of your time and so much of your life actually doing. Why wouldn't you want to do something that actually brings you joy in some way? But then that kind of brings us to a conversation about joy, happiness, self-care. Over the last 11 months of the year, I have been working really hard, but the work has been very different to how it was last year. Last year was like a lot of physical strain. I could feel it on my body, the up and the down, the constantly worrying about things, worrying about money. I mean, that's not just last year, that's like the last 3 years, because obviously the pandemic. I've started working on things that bring me more passion, that kind of push me creatively. Honestly, my mantra this year has been, I only work on things that I enjoy and that I like. And as much as people may think like, oh, that's such a Gen Z thing, I only want to do things that motivate me, life is not always going to be motivating. And yeah, I completely agree. I also don't want to suffer. I think that's just a normal human feeling. And so I took that approach of, I've gotten to a point where I've been able to save enough and I can stop. I can really hit pause. And even if I'm not making as much money, which in the beginning it was very hard because I wasn't making as much money, working hard was bringing results, I kind of saw it as, in slowing down, it's gonna feel like life is getting ahead of you and you're falling behind. But what this slowing down is gonna allow me to do is actually rest and recoup and recover so that I can start running faster, because it's not like I was running very well before. And I think that's one thing that self-care allows you to see, that you were actually performing very inefficiently. You were performing at a way that was actually detrimental to your journey and to your process and to you actually approaching your goals. I was so tired, I was so exhausted that I couldn't think creatively, I couldn't think innovatively. I was actually holding myself back by constantly being overworked. It took a degree of freedom for me to be able to do that self-care thing and to be able to say, for the next year, I'm only going to work on things I love. Not everyone is in that position. Freedom for a lot of people is a privilege. And I'm so happy I was able to work myself to that point. But I think that should be a lot of people's goal, working to the point of freedom. If you are going to be, feeding into hustle culture, not necessarily toxic hustle culture, but hustle culture, I think you should remind yourself constantly of the goal of freedom. And also realizing that freedom is not just about financial freedom, it's also your time. your energy, your health, right? You may be at a place where, yeah, I've got loads of time, I'm in my 20s, let me work. But this is also the most physically healthy you may actually be. This is the most freedom you're going to have physically. And so how are you then capitalizing on that? If freedom is your goal, you should be looking for freedom in everything that you are actually doing and in every season of your life. But I do think there are places where self-care and that rhetoric can actually go too far, in the sense that life is not always going to be easy. Life is not always going to be fun. You're not always going to be passionate about what it is you're doing. And I think the best way to deal with those things is to make them as short term as they can be. But in terms of speaking more specifically to working, entrepreneurship, career wise, yeah, you might not always love your job, you might not always love your role, but you have to look at everything as a stepping stone. Are you being intentional in your work? Are you allowing your current work to shape you and help you grow as a person? And that growth can happen in several different ways, but also, are you allowing yourself to actually be challenged? And sometimes that discomfort is actually very, very good for you. That discomfort gives you the room to actually grow, and that's what grows you. I think for me, my upbringing and my perspective of the world has definitely made me accept the fact that life is not fair. And that's not necessarily meaning that life is always bad or that life is always good. It's just that things like meritocracy aren't necessarily true. So I can't lie, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I really just wanted this video to start a conversation about toxic hustle culture. I actually will do a video talking about the things that I have learned on how to kind of balance toxic hustle culture and self-care, and the things that I've realized that I've had to do, like trying to work smarter and detaching my self-worth and self-value from work, and also creating a new personal ethos for my life and realizing that I have to set new goals. But I wanted this to be a conversation starter. So before I make that video, please let me know in the comments what you think. How do you think we can balance toxic hustle culture and self-care? And also, do you think that there is a level of self-care that can become toxic, or self-care rhetoric that can become toxic, or just unhelpful? But also, I just want to know where you're at. Do you feel like you have a healthy relationship with work if you are an entrepreneur or you have a career or whatever it is? Do you feel like you have a healthy relationship with work? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's have a conversation. And I will see you with part 2 of this video maybe next week. Yeah? And so yes, I hope that this video, kind of essay, kind of a rant, kind of just thinking out loud, has caused you to think. I'll talk to you very soon, and as always, stay beautiful and stay blessed. Mwah.